G'day there, welcome back to The Race Side. Today I'm going to be jumping in my full review of Star Wars Outlaws. This is going to be a very overall review. I'm going to touch on many of the main aspects of a good game, but heading into this game, all we knew was the scoundrel-esque storyline that we were going to be given with Kay Vess, and you get to be a gunslinger running around the underworld doing missions and quests, and to be honest, that didn't immediately grab my attention hearing about this game. It wasn't until closer and getting to actually test the game and play the game where I really understood how these mechanics made such a immersive experience for myself for this game. The storyline of the main character Kay Vess and subsequent characters you meet along the way is very straightforward, it's very simple, but I think that really lends to the experience. You really can focus on the stories that you can make as the player, as your character, by choosing what missions, choosing what syndicates to side with, and choosing how you want to be as an outlaw in the Star Wars underworld. First up, I want to talk about the actual worlds and environments we get in this game. I was really impressed with the expansiveness of the game. That is what they promised us. They promised us open world. And as much as it's not literally an open whole planet we can go throughout, it is very expansive. From my experience, I felt like there was so many towns, cantinas, cities within a planet destination that I could explore. And I've spent hours upon hours on each one. And I feel like there's still so much more to discover with each planet, which I really love. So, I mean, sinking a good amount of time into each planet, but still finding more is a big tick for me, feeling open world enough. And especially the speed of travel ties into that and creates that sensation of the openness so much more, because you can really feel like, hey, I got to jump on my speeder bike and I got to travel for a good few minutes to get somewhere. That really adds to the energy and that open feel that they promised us. The planets being Akiva, which is from the Aftermath trilogy, which is a book series that came out quite a few years ago now, but fairly well loved by fans. Haven't read it, but I know other fans love it. Akiva, which is its first live action debut. We have a new planet called Tashana, which was created for this game. We have Kijimi, which was of course in Rise of Skywalker. We have Canto Bight as well as getting an add-on to be able to go to Tatooine in the game's extended edition. These planets naturally, I think, gifted us the variety of environments that makes the game quite stimulating. You have a desert planet, you have a lush jungle planet, you have a kind of barren outcroppy sort of planet, you've got a snowy planet. You present us in visually stimulating interest for the game. So when you're going through planet to planet, you feel like you're on the different spaces. It's not just you're in another town. It's like you know where you are in the planet because of the different environment, and that just felt to me so immersive. Adding those details of the layers of feeling different in different places added to that kind of depth of the game. Each destination had a plethora of fantastic sort of types of people and types of social NPCs that lived in the towns that I think matched each place really well, and creatures as well as we have Nyx, and I'll talk about Nyx a little later on. The actual creatures around the environments where I felt like, again, just adding to that detail, because that's one of the fantastic things about Star Wars. You know, any planet we go to, you know, we're introduced to Tatooine, we're introduced to Naboo, like we see these planets and we go, okay, there's, you know, water, there's grass, there's, you know, these sort of things around the environment, but there's also a lot of creatures, and that's also been quite a strong theme throughout introducing a planet in Star Wars storytelling. So I love that fact as well, because it just adds to that real reality to these planets. This is a great time to segue into my next point, which is talking about the music of this game, which is probably one of the things that is a 10 out of 10 for me for this game. It ties in with the planets so well, and I think about the planets thinking about the music, because thematically each planet has their own music style, whether it's in the cantina on the planet where you can choose your own song that's playing in the cantina, or if it's the background music playing as you're traversing the countryside of whatever planet you are on, matches the energy, the feel and the vibe of each planet. And I love that fact. Again, just adding to that immersive quality, which is my big tick of the game, my biggest pro about this game, of how immersive it is. And the music does a fantastic job of that. The actual composition of it was really impressive. I found it very derivative of classic original trilogy Star Wars. I think each trilogy has a bit of a different sound, and even, you know, when you look in the shows, there's different sounds. But there's something about the original trilogy where I feel like that had a lot of influence into the sound of this game, into each of the themes. Very classical sounding, but even the music within the cantinas, which was always a fun addition into Star Wars storytelling, was just really nail on the head. It was so good. It was such an enjoyable element of the game. And of course, it's, if you're sitting there for hours and hours playing the game, you're going to be listening to stuff for hours and hours. You want something that's interesting, but also, sets the scene, sets the mood, and really adds to the game. And I just think the Star Wars Outlaws soundtrack really, really did that fantastically. Let's talk about the actual actions within the game. First up, talking about the combat. Now, this is a subjective thing because some people don't like stealth mode, but there was a lot of stealth in this game. But me personally, really enjoyed that. I haven't played a lot of stealth games myself. This is probably the first one, honestly, and I adored it. I thought it was really, really cool. There was a few buggy moments for me that I did experience where someone, I was stealthing around, but I realized that, the enemy wasn't actually even realizing I was there. But nonetheless, most of the time, it was a really, really fun element of the game that I really enjoyed, having to figure out the best route around enemies, around the pikes, around stormtroopers to get to the other side, to get into a vent, to do, finish the mission. I love that element. I thought that was great. I was engaged with it. I was really locked in when those situations were happening. And I thought they used that stealth mode quite well throughout the game. And as well as having that level of combat and well, that's not really combat, but just an element of, trying not to get alerted to enemies and enter a fight. One thing that was really fantastic was the actual when you're in a standoff, when the, stormtroopers have you wanted, they have you surrounded and trying to take you down. I found that very natural to, it took me a second to click with it, but once I clicked with it, I really enjoyed with it. It's a lot more straightforward. It's not as, willy-nilly kind of running around as, say, like a Cal Kestis in Jedi Fallen Order. It's really more calculated when you're, blocking, when you're hiding behind things and then coming out to shoot. There's also the fantastic marking system that Cave Vess had where you can lock in your blaster to certain enemies and in one swift move take them down, which I really enjoyed throughout this game as well. So I had a good time. I know some people, don't like certain elements of certain combat, but for me, I had a great experience with it. I thought, once I got the pattern down of how calculated you should be hiding and coming out to shoot and things like that, I enjoyed it a lot. The exploration element of this game was also something that was really quite impressive. And this, again, I'll kind of slowly segue into talking about the actual, leveling and development of this game, because the exploration was quite in-depth for me personally. I didn't think it was going to be to the level it was, honestly. I think it was really impressive how they had laid out the quests, the missions, and the subsequent side quests and side stories and different journeys you can go on. There was so much availability there. And what I enjoyed is that you unlocked it very quickly. Within the first few hours of the game, you had a plethora of different avenues to choose from. You can continue on the main quest, but there's also so much benefit into unlocking different missions for other people and working with other syndicates to unlock something else to then continue the main quest to do better at that. And I love that element. It was really interconnected. Again, adding that element of the emphasis is on the player and the user. You have to really choose what you want to pursue, and that overall affects your whole experience of the game. And I enjoyed the connection between the planets as well. You would discover someone talking on Tatooine, hey, you need to go pick up this thing, or there's a cargo ship heading to Akiva, and you got to head there and intercept it. I like that connective part of it where not only were missions and quests within the same planet, but it was also spread out to other planets, being like, hey, can you go rescue this thing from Kajimi? So I love that fact. The character progression was something that was really interesting, and I've been harping on this a little bit in my Outlaws content so far, is that it's actually quite mild. Cave Vess's story is very straightforward. It's not something that is do a crazy narrative exploration as, again, like a Cal Kestis. I hate to compare, but it's also helpful to compare right now. Definitely not to that detail or depth of a Cal Kestis story, where Cave Vess is more of a straightforward, someone on the run, someone trying to buy their freedom from the Empire. We're living in the peak of the Imperial reign, and how is she getting by? Well, that's the story you go on. I found it engaging. I think it was quite good. It wasn't something that affected something else in the Star Wars universe, which I think I really enjoyed the independence of this game in that way. Her story didn't impact, the next movie or, whatever have you. It didn't impact anything really. It's really quite independent. Some people that might not like that, but I think for this game, I really enjoyed how just this is just her journey as a someone living in the underworld, in the syndicates, running around as an outlaw in this time. But it's very straightforward, something you can get along with, and the characters you discover is just fantastic along this journey. The characters you work with is really, really fun. Shout out to ND5, which I don't know if he's meant to be called Ned, but ND is absolutely a fantastic character. He was my favorite part of this game, honestly, because I loved hearing when he talked, and his kind of relationship building with Kay went so well, and I think their characters bounced off each other fantastically. I think it made Kay, I found I really clicked more with Kay once ND was in the picture, and kind of added a bit of, showed the dynamic of those two characters. It added so much for me, and I just loved him being, throughout the storyline and being there to help and aid in what was happening. Now, I don't have a super detailed critique on the actual numbers of when it comes to frame rate and optimization for this game, but coming from someone who just enjoys to play games but isn't a super nerd for the facts and details behind gameplay, it was a little janky. It was a little janky. I can't pin down where or how or why, but I did find there was something very angular and not very rounded about the graphics that I found, especially with characters and people or aliens. It felt almost like it was a few years behind its graphic time. So I don't know what that element is. I don't know why, if that was intentional in any way. But I did really have to kind of push beyond that part. I really had to kind of set myself in the scene and go, okay, that is the character we're going for. Most notably, I really felt this come to the forefront when we met Kira and, working with the Ashiga clan and Crimson Dawn. I met Kira, of course, and played by Amelia Clark, very famous face. And I just could not for a second believe it was her. And I mean, and that was on live stream too. So let me know if you were there watching this. But I don't know what it was. It just the actual scaling of faces didn't feel right. And even Kay Vess's face, Humbly Gonzalez, who plays Kay Vess and does the mocap for Kay Vess, is a beautiful person, and she's such a fantastic actress. And I felt like they didn't match too much of her either. So that is something that did kind of catch me throughout the game. I've kind of talked about all the things that really hit it off for me for this game. But one thing was just the actual cutscenes, the characters talking. I felt like the voice wasn't that synced up, and that really took me out of it for a second. I really had to kind of actively go, no, we're in the Star Wars universe. I believe it. We're in here. But it was pretty janky. Pushing past the graphics and, looking at the quests and the, actual mission system of this game, we're going back to another pro, because I thought this was so good, so in depth. And I've already kind of touched on this in other areas of talking about the game. But the actual leveling system was just so well done, and I think that was my favorite part of the game is learning about it and actually figuring out, okay, the reputation system. We have the 4 syndicates. What does this mean? Okay, if I do this decision, this is going to affect this. And the way that they not only just made, you're in the good graces of certain syndicates, but the way they said, if you're in with the Pikes, Crimson Dawn aren't going to let you into this area of a map. And if you're in with Crimson Dawn, the Pikes aren't going to let you do this thing. And I thought that was a fantastic system. I think it's very realistic in a way and very logical. And I just really enjoyed navigating that whole system. And talking a little bit about the gameplay and the side quests of the game, that tier system of the main quest, side quests, contracts, missions. There's just all these levels of things you could be doing, and it just great depth, adds such great depth to the game that I really, really enjoyed. So to try and sum up my ramble here of Star Wars Outlaws, I'm gonna lay out my selling points of the game and parts of the game that really fell short for me. Selling points, the immersiveness they nailed. They really, really got it for me. I think the layout of each planet, the openness of each map on each planet was so vast and wide with so much in it. And the little details like the music, the dialogue, and mentions of certain elements of Star Wars, NPCs talking about the Death Star blowing up, about the Rebel Alliance and things like that, really just set you in the scene of a Star Wars universe, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. So if you just want to run around in underground Star Wars planets, it feels like that. And even though these planets, they're not Coruscant, they're not Naboo, that you are immersed with all the Star Wars aliens and all the Star Wars feeling and paraphernalia and all this kind of stuff around each destination, which makes it so good. So it's immersive. That is a big tick for me. It felt really good. I felt like I was in the Star Wars galaxy. The leveling system I found really complex and in depth. If you want a game that you want to sink a lot of hours to and just get locked in, trying to leveling up your weapons, your ship, your speeder, level up yourself as with your skill base as well within the game, this does it for me. I think that the system was just so complex to a really good degree. It just made it so you didn't ever feel like, oh, I'm just kind of going in circles here. You were always getting better and being able to unlock things. The unlocking just kept happening. Even when you thought you've like, oh, I've opened up this whole map, you can still unlock more with different abilities. And that was just, they did that very well. I did find the characters really enjoyable to watch along to. Like I mentioned, Kay Vess, she mild character, but someone that is just a fun character for me to watch throughout Star Wars. And I thought she was really cool. And ND was absolutely fantastic as a really badass trench coat wearing droid. And Nix is an adorable, helpful little Star Wars creature that I think is just going to be cemented into that kind of cute little circle of fantastic favorite Star Wars creatures. He is such a great addition to the game and such a great draw card for me. One thing to mention, which I'm only remembering now, is to mention how involved the Empire is in this game. That's actually probably another tick for me, another selling point. We're cemented in this time where it's in between the Empire Strikes Back and Return of the Jedi, so the Imperial reign is quite strong, and it's quite strong within the game. The focus is in these, crime syndicates of the underworld, but the Empire is everywhere. They've got all these outposts and you can be wanted by them. You have to infiltrate their bases. And that makes it very Star Wars. That makes it very immersive. And I love that fact. I didn't really know how involved that part was going to be, or they were going to be in the game. But that came out very strongly in the game. And I love that part. A few drawbacks for me for the game is probably the bugs. I think, like I mentioned, I've come across, it only started a good while into the game, to be fair, but there was just a few things, a few audio, skips and hiccups here and there, but then there was some more major ones that I know Ubisoft were aware of. They, put out that they're trying to patch up a few things. There was a certain mission I was trying to complete where it kept glitching at a certain point and I couldn't access Nix and I couldn't get through to the next door and all these kinds of things. So those glitches did, bring me to a halt. I had to end up just like stopping playing because I was like, I cannot continue right now with this thing and I'll just, save, go back to my last save and continue this later. So that was a big part of this game, that a part of my experience, that I accept that that's kind of the reality with releasing new big games like this, but also, it takes it out of it. It takes that kind of momentum and that enjoyment out of it for that, how you're playing along with the game. And so yes, it's understandable and it comes with new big games, but also it still was annoying and still was like, where it patch this, wow. But with hopefully, patches in the future, that can be solved. Final verdict, I really think this is a great addition to the Star Wars universe. It's something that's independent enough that it doesn't affect the movies in a big way, so it doesn't upset any of the storylines that we know and love of Star Wars. But it's also connected enough that it does feel like a Star Wars game. You are seeing Quarren, you are seeing Mon Cala, you're seeing Twi'leks, you're shooting around stormtroopers, you're doing missions, and you're feeling like a real outlaw within the Star Wars universe. The immersivity of this game is just the best thing I've experienced. You get a good taste of that in games like Jedi Fallen Order and Survivor. You feel like a cool Jedi running around the galaxy, but this game, I just found that openness of exploration was such an enjoyable part of the game, and I spent most of my hours wanting to just run around on the speeder or explore a town, and not actually pursuing the main quest because there's just so much to do and explore. So between those two things, the independence of the story, but the actual openness of the game itself was just a fantastic combo for me. I really enjoyed those two things kind of coming together like an Oreo almost, like a nice sandwich of just like both of those things. Like, yeah, is good shit. If I had to define who this game is really for, I do think Star Wars fans would have more of a good time playing this game as opposed to gaming fans that aren't that big into Star Wars. I think the element of the Star Wars immersivity of it is the big ticket for me, and I think that there is a lot of issues with the gameplay and certain elements of stealth. A lot of people don't like stealth games that just might not click for avid gamers, but I think Star Wars fans can get really behind engaging in an underworld story like this one. So should you buy this game? If you are an avid Star Wars fan and just want to like lose a few hours every couple of days just running around a planet, it's a good time for that. It is really, really good for that. As opposed to a Cal Kestis storyline, he had a fantastically strong storyline. I wouldn't be buying this for that depth of a story because Kay, again, it's quite mild, it's straightforward. It's still a good, journey she goes on, but it's quite mild in its depth and intensity. So if you just want to explore and use those, different combat abilities, see what you can expand with the different syndicates, it's definitely something you would want to be picking up. So let me know down in the comments if you have already played this game and what you think of it so far, and a bit of a summary of your review if you have been enjoying it or not. And let me know if I have convinced you to maybe consider thinking about this game. I appreciate you listening along to this big ramble, and make sure you're tuning into the channel because we'll be still streaming this game, all the little side quests and all the chaos that we have in the Star Wars universe, of course. So make sure you're tuning into those live shows to not miss a thing. You're always a part of the family here when you're here on the race side. So before you go and you're out in the world, make sure you're always choosing the race side.